Growing up, we often heard this phrase from teachers and parents and coaches that practice makes perfect. Turns out that's not true. We are all quite capable of practicing something incorrectly and getting very good at doing it wrong. So that gave way to practice makes permanent, or perfect practice makes perfect, and now the much more humane practice makes progress. But tonight I want to talk to you about when practice doesn't make progress. In the spring of 2007, I got a phone call from the leader of a high-end wedding and corporate events band. And his regular guitar player was getting shoulder surgery, and he was going to miss the summer season of all these busy season of gigs. And did I want to sub in his band for this summer? And I was in no way qualified to do this. I was not familiar with the repertoire. I didn't have the right kind of gear. I'd never done anything at this level before. I didn't even own a suit. But I said yes. I put myself on the hook to learn 100 songs in 6 weeks. And then I got to work. I began practicing 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 weeks. That's 500 hours of practice. And in my mind, this was like the training montage from a martial arts film. This was Rocky or Karate Kid or Batman Begins or Kung Fu Panda. There was the me from before and the me I aimed to become, and in between was this crucible of practice, this sprint of effort. And I expected to go from a pretty good guitar player to a fully professional guitar player. But that is not what happened. Instead, what happened is I got a tiny bit better. I put in a lot of practice, but I didn't get a lot of progress. And if you've ever played an instrument or a sport, or you have a hobby with some sort of skill component, you've felt this before, this feeling of being stuck on a plateau, like your progress is being limited by an invisible ceiling. You've also seen the opposite of this, though. You've seen someone who has natural talent. You've seen a prodigy. You've seen someone whose skills far outpace the amount of time that they've spent working on their craft. And I hope you will forgive this deeply unscientific chart, but that's how I felt in my first year of playing guitar, like I had natural talent. Every time I picked up the guitar, I got better. And then about a year in, that leveled off. And then for the next 29 years, it was very slow progress, stuck on a plateau, and occasionally I would get unstuck and sort of lurch forward onto the next plateau. But I never regained that feeling of having natural talent. Now, I should mention here, I did all the things you're supposed to do. I read the books, I watched the videos, I took the courses, I enrolled in music school. I had 2 excellent teachers, but I never regained that feeling of having natural talent. I keep saying this phrase, natural talent. Let's define it. My definition of natural talent is the ability to turn practice into progress efficiently. The problem with this definition is it doesn't tell us why some people are more efficient than others. It doesn't tell us how we might get more efficient in turning our own practice into progress. So let's look at that. I realize this is a music-themed TED event, so I'm sorry for this sports analogy, but here we go. Here are 2 basketball players. They're actually twin brothers, so they're the same age, same height, same weight. They've been playing basketball for the same amount of time. Player A in the red jersey, he practices 4 hours a day, and his twin brother, player B, practices 1 hour a day. We fully expect player A to be better and improving faster than his twin brother, player B. But what if I told you that for the 4 hours a day he's been practicing, for as long as anyone can remember, he's been practicing while wearing a blindfold? Do we still think player A, wearing this blindfold, putting in 4 times as much work, that he still has an advantage over player B? Or do we now assume that player B, who can actually see while he's practicing, is going to have the advantage? He's going to be better and improving faster. Now, I know this is a silly and ridiculous example because no one practices basketball while wearing a blindfold. However, another thing that I know to be true is that naturally talented people, prodigies, experts, they perceive more and better at a higher resolution than the rest of us. It's as if the rest of us are wearing a blindfold or earplugs, while the people with the natural talent, they're taking in raw, unfiltered reality. Another way of saying this is that experts have high definition perceptions. The chef and the sommelier taste and smell more detail in the food and the wine that they serve to us than we do. A chess master looks at a game in progress, and she sees threats and opportunities that are completely lost on us. We just see a jumble of pieces. Experts have high-definition perceptions. That's something I learned from the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition. There's a bunch of juicy stuff in here that we do not have time to get into tonight, but the big takeaway for me is that an expert is not just someone who has more experience, more skill, and more knowledge. An expert literally perceives the world differently in higher definition. So if we return to my definition of natural talent, the ability to turn practice into progress efficiently, what is it that enables this efficiency? It's perception. I'm going to go you one further. I think you already believe this to be true, even if you don't know it yet. Raise your hand if you know what perfect pitch is. For those of you that don't know, a person with perfect pitch can hear any note and immediately name that note. And if you say to a person with perfect pitch, hey, sing a B flat, they will sing a perfectly in tune B flat. And if I go over to this piano over here, mash my hands on the keyboard, the person with perfect pitch will tell me every single note that was in the chord that I just played. Perfect pitch is pretty rare, but it is widely assumed to be kind of like a cheat code that if you have perfect pitch, you're going to leapfrog your peers and make rapid progress. Perfect pitch is just enhanced perception. But it's not just perfect pitch that's about perception. All practice tools are perception tools. If you think about a well-equipped practice room, what's in it? Well, there's a metronome. What's the metronome for? It's there to help us perceive time. There's a mirror. What's the mirror for? It's there to help us perceive our posture and our technique. If we're fortunate, we have a teacher. What's the teacher for? The teacher is there to help us perceive things that we don't even know about ourselves. Nowadays, we all have a recording studio in our laptop. And if you record yourself and listen back, you will get better. You will improve because you will perceive what you actually sound like instead of what you think you sound like. If you go to music school, they will put you in ear training classes to teach you to perceive intervals and chord qualities. Practice tools are perception tools. And that is because perception is what enables progress. So after I had this realization, it changed everything for me in the way that I teach my students. I'm no longer there just to share my experience and my knowledge, my skills, my opinions. I'm there to help them improve their perceptions so that they can get more natural talent. And we're doing this with what I come to think of as perception training tools. And I want to show you one of these perception training tools, but first I want to go back to this chart of the progress of my guitar skills over time. This year, after 30 years of plateau, I suddenly made sudden and dramatic progress. Not just a lurch forward onto a new plateau, but an entirely different trajectory. And I didn't do it by practicing a lot. So what was I doing? I was transcribing. Transcribing is an old and well-known practice tool. It's when you listen very closely to a recording and then you write down in great detail what another musician has played. In my case, I was hired to write some charts. You might call this sheet music or arrangements. But I got hired to create all of the sheet music for 2 full concerts, 20 plus songs each. And I did it all in about 6 weeks, 8 hours a day, transcribing guitar, bass, drums, piano, violin. And I didn't have a lot of time to practice my instrument during this time, didn't have a lot of time to play for enjoyment. And when I finished this project, I went back to my instrument, I was shocked to discover that I had gotten so much better. But maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, because one thing that I know to be true about transcribing is that no matter how many times you've listened to a song before, when you go to write it down, you notice new things. The act of writing it out, of transcribing, literally increases the resolution of your perceptions. So, transcribing has long been a part of learning to be a musician. We know it works wonders, but it's still not very popular, and the reason for that is that it's really hard. It's hard to do it all, but it's especially difficult to begin doing because it assumes that you already have 3 things going for yourself. 1, that you can figure this thing out by ear. 2, that you already speak the language of music and you know what these things are called. And 3, that you have a notational system that will allow you to capture this on the page. So, if you imagine an amusement park ride, and out front there's a sign that says, "You must be this tall to ride." For transcribing, that sign says, "You must be this talented in order to get that talented. You must already possess these skills in order to get those skills." And to be fair, all our practice tools have a learning curve, but nowhere is it more pronounced than with transcribing. You stand to gain so much more, but the barrier to entry is so high. So again, in working with my own students in trying to increase the quality of their perceptions so they can have more natural talent, I don't need to invent brand new practice tools. I need to look at the existing practice tools and ask, where is this failing the average learner? Can I build an on-ramp to make this more accessible to a less advanced musician? I want to show you this tool now. This is called Organized Noticing. It's just like transcribing, but we've scaled it down to meet the learner where they are. We've put some guardrails up to keep them out of the gutter. We've put some handles on there to help them lift up this heavy object. And at its core, Organized Noticing is very simple. We put our headphones on, we listen very closely, and then we write down the things that we notice. It starts with labeling the sections: intro, verse, chorus, bridge. Then we go through and we talk about instrumentation. Where do these instruments come in and out? Oh, the drums enter in verse 2. And then we take a look at the repeated sections and we see how they differ. The bass plays these long sustained notes in verse 1, but then in verse 2, when the drums come in, now it's playing this more active role, and the rhythms of those two things mesh together. When we do this, we're not doing it with Spotify and a piece of paper. We listen using something called a DAW. This is just an app for recording music. We're using it for learning music. And the reason that we use the DAW is that if you're listening to the music in Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube, and you notice something that you want to take note of, you're forced to refer to it with the timestamp, minutes and seconds. The bridge begins at 2 minutes and 34 seconds. The measuring stick of clock time, minutes and seconds, is not the measuring stick of musical time. The measuring stick of musical time is bars and beats, and the DAW gives us a ruler calibrated in bars and beats. It's a much better reference point. It allows us to, instead of saying the bridge begins at 2 minutes and 34 seconds, we say the bridge begins in bar 113. Instead of saying the chorus is 18 seconds long, we could say the chorus is 8 bars long. It's much more useful for us. That's why we like to listen inside the DAW instead of with a streaming app. When we write it down, we don't just use a piece of paper. We use something called a score writer. And the score writer is just an app for making sheet music. The score writer measures time with the same measuring stick as the DAW, bars and beats. Here's a blank score in my score writer. You can see I've highlighted for you here these bar numbers underneath the bars themselves. And this is really nice because you have a one-to-one mirroring between the DAW and the score writer. So when I notice something in bar 37 of my DAW, where do I put this thing that I've noticed? I put it in bar 37 in the score writer. Proper old-school transcribing assumes, again, that you are already familiar with the notation and the conventions of written music. And that's why when I write charts for other professional musicians to read, it looks like this, or this, or this. But with Organized Noticing, we mostly use plain English. It's that guitar break starting at measure 37. The band hits on beat 1 before the third chorus, which is a different length than the 2 that preceded it. And the outro's got, mostly drums and vocals, but the band hits on beats 3 and 4. So we've got a better listening tool, we have a better writing tool, we have a more universal language. We are meeting the learner where they are. Still, it can be difficult to know what is it that I'm hearing in this section. And so another thing that we love about the DAW, and we love about this moment we find ourselves in right now, is a new thing called stem separation. I've put this song inside the DAW, and I click this button, and it takes the finished song and breaks it down into its component parts, the vocals by themselves, the drums by themselves, the bass by itself, guitars by themselves, keyboards on their own. How much clearer is it to us what's happening in a song when we can hear all of these pieces in isolation? Okay, I'm pretty deep into organized noticing, pretty excited about it, maybe talking over your heads a little bit, but the point of this is not organized noticing. The point of this TED Talk is not any of these perception training tools that I've developed. The point of this TED Talk is to impress upon you the importance of perception, because it is perception that turns practice into progress. So if you are stuck, if you're discouraged, if you're a teacher whose students aren't making progress, if motivation is an issue, I don't want you to focus on the amount of time spent practicing. I want you to focus instead on increasing the quality of your perceptions, because it's the perceptions that allow us to efficiently turn practice into progress. Natural talent is simply better perceptions, and we have the tools to improve our perceptions, which means that natural talent is a learnable skill. I'm Josh Skaja. Thank you so much.